and welcome to Searching for Sparks. This is episode 3, season 3, and I'm really happy to have G.E. Stinson with us today. G.E. is an amazing guitar player, composer, producer, founder of Shadowfax, a continuing music explorer to this day in Los Angeles. And we're going to find out a lot about G.E. and where things are in the music world these days. So won't you please welcome G.E. Stinson to Searching for Sparks.
Hello, Tim.
G.E.
How are you, brother?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Not bad. You know, hanging in there, considering how weird the world is.
Yeah, we should probably talk about that.
That's a rabbit hole, dude.
Yes.
Whatever you want.
But no, we're going to probably jump all over the place. But firstly, I just want to say, man, it's good to see you. It's been a while. We had some nice hangs in LA a few years back, and it's always great to see you. And, you know, you're one of these musical guys that, you know, is just on it forever, right? You're
yeah. Been doing this for a minute. Yeah.
And, you know, I've been listening and finding more music that I've never heard just recently, including a duo record you did with Alex de Grassi, which I thought was really an amazing album. Was really surprised to find that. And I know he was a former label mate at Windham Hill.
Yeah. And a good friend.
Okay.
We toured together a little bit, and you know, whenever Alex came into town, we would hang out. Whenever I was up there, I used to stay at his house when he lived in San Francisco.
All right.
Yeah, he's a great guy, incredible musician.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know when we talked last if I mentioned that I was in college radio in the '80s at Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio, and you know, all the Windham Hill stuff was coming into the station, and I was the music director, so I was placing a lot of that. And Shadowfax was on heavy rotation. All 3 of those records I remember, you know, Shadow Dance and The Dream of Children. I remember those 2 specifically, and then the Shadowfax album. Those are the 3 that come to mind. And you know, Shadowfax was kind of like, I would love to hear how you would define or describe what that band was about, but you know, it fell in the new age category, but it was really like a world music band in a way, from my point of view. And the sounds that you were coming up with then were really fresh and brand new. And cinematic, I guess, is a catch-all word, but cinematic music, beautiful music.
That word works for a lot of what we did. Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't know that before the '80s, when we were on Windham Hill, we were sort of we started out trying to do a fusion or a synthesis of all the different kinds of music that we loved.
Yes.
And as blues rock musicians with some jazz leanings, I mean, our horn player had, you know, some. I was fascinated by jazz, although I had no background in it. I didn't know bebop music, although I'd learned some Charlie Parker tunes.
Yeah.
That was challenging, not being a reader.
Wow.
But we started out just trying to kind of do a synthesis of all these different kinds of music that we loved: rock, jazz, blues, world music, you know, some weird classical, even early music, like, you know, like medieval music, Renaissance music, stuff like that. Our first record came out in 1976 on Passport. And I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's called Watercourse Way. It's quite a bit different from a lot of the stuff that we did on Windham Hill. It was wild and woolly, lots of odd time signatures, very loud at times, but we also had an acoustic side. You know, we did like 2 acoustic pieces on our first record. But the rest of it was pretty wild and woolly, to be honest with you.
And where were the influences coming from for that record, would you say?
Well, for me, they started early on in terms of my musical curiosity and restlessness, being into sound. but I think the first time I ventured into like, well, I went to see Ornette Coleman when I was in 1968. I was in college in Chicago, and he was playing with his quartet with Dewey Redman, Charlie, and Ed Blackwell.
Wow.
And I'll be honest with you, I didn't understand. I had no clue what they were doing. I was just like, what is this? But it was intriguing in a way where I was like, I need to like investigate this music, find out what's going on. And then, shortly after that, maybe right on the heels of that, a lot of these sort of early fusion jazz things happened, like Bitches Brew,
right?
Miles Davis, and my friend who was a bass player in one of the rock bands I was in, who ended up being a really great recording engineer. He turned me on to Bitches Brew,
right?
And I'd already listened to like Dave Brubeck and Charlie Parker, and I'd listened to some of these guys, some jazz singers like Mark Murphy,
sure.
But mostly I was a rock blues guy. I mean, it started out as blues, but I was always into sound. I liked experimenting with sound. What intrigued me, what got me into music in the first place was the sound of Bo Diddley's guitar.
Yeah.
First time I heard it, I was like, what is that? Why does that sound like that? I need to do that, So, when we started hearing these bands like Weather Report, Oregon, Mahavishnu, Return to Forever, Miles Davis's electric stuff.
Yeah.
I was totally into it and fascinated because I'd done a lot of funk music doing R&B and blues. So the fact that jazz guys were now doing grooves was really interesting to me and seemed like a gateway into that music for me.
Absolutely.
I'd also sort of heard, unbeknownst to me, went to see Led Zeppelin, and Jethro Tull was opening for them.
Oh, wow.
And they blew my mind.
Yeah.
And it was another moment where I went, wait a minute, you can do jazz and rock at the same time, because the early stuff, they used to do like a Roland Kirk song.
Absolutely.
And that rhythm section of Clive Bunker and Glenn Cornick was amazingly great. I mean, very versatile.
Yeah.
So that was another like peek into a world that might exist, might be forming, opening up. So basically, we tried to sort of, like do our version of that.
Sure.
But not being like highly educated musicians. None of us had degrees in music or anything. We were just kind of stumbling into it as, stumbling along as we could, in the best way we knew how. And that's how basically it started. I'd been in a blues rock band. And then, I was playing with this horn player, Chuck Greenberg, once in a while. And I heard some of these bands and I said to him, I want to start like an instrumental band doing, purely instrumental, like all this. I want to do all these. I was telling him what I wanted to do. And I said, do you want to do it? And he said, yeah, sure. Because there weren't many bands like that in those days. Most bands that we knew had vocalists. You know what I mean? They were doing songs. You know? They weren't doing instrumental pieces.
Yeah,
so that's how Shadowfax started.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I think back. I was born in '60, so as a teenager, maybe 11, 12, 13, was 72, 73, 74. I was listening. Hendrix was probably the first thing that jumped in, and then at some point I did get into progressive rock because I was listening to, there was a record store and this guy would call me and he was getting imports in and I would get everything he said, basically. Steve Hillage, Gong, Jethro Tull, yes, Genesis, all this stuff. But at the same time, I discovered Miles Davis and I was like, so what? How are they doing that? And then that led to Bitches Brew and the Miles Electric. And then all of a sudden we're into fusion. And then the same as you, as Mahavishnu, Return to Forever, Weather Report, of course, and on and on. And
Oregon too.
Yeah, Oregon for sure. And I felt like that moment in time was really amazing because, progressive rock and jazz fusion were, we were all listening to all of that at that time.
I have to say that I was not listening to a lot of progressive rock.
All right.
Now, I kind of stopped at Jethro Tull.
Nice.
Although there were bands that I considered sort of progressive bands. I don't know if you remember Spooky Tooth.
Yeah.
I loved Spooky Tooth, and they were kind of a weird, what I would call a cinematic rock band in a way.
Okay.
I think they were kind of a little kind of like a gateway to what would come later, like with Tubular Bells and things like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I love that band, but I didn't like a lot of prog. I mean, I'm trying to think of, other than Jethro Tull, I didn't hate it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
In fact, we got lumped into that category right away. Oh, this is a prog rock band, And I was like, no, we're not trying to do that. We're trying to do more like Weather Report, Mahavishnu, like Oregon kind of thing. And if you listen to our first record, you can hear all those influences in it.
Oh, that's cool. I'll check it out. But, it is interesting because I think some of the sounds, because we were talking sounds, and I think some of the sounds that was in progressive rock, like the Mellotrons and, the 12-string guitars and just different synthesis, that all went into fusion, and we heard Joe Zawinul with his synths when he finally started working with synthesizers.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, that was the gateway into all of that music. Because it was
in a way, I consider bands like the Moody Blues,
sure,
Jimi Hendrix, and bands like that as the sort of beginning of progressive rock.
I agree,
because they were pushing the boundaries out.
I totally agree with that.
Into like classical music, all these different elements, cinematic elements,
And I was listening to Electric Ladyland just the other day. And
crazy great record.
Had it cranked in the car, and 1983 comes on, and it's like that's his dream, you know. And it's a symphony, and it's all done with guitars and feedback, and it's just one of the most gorgeous pieces. And
that's one of my favorite Hendrix pieces of all time, dude. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's and it doesn't matter, as the years go by, as I put those records back on, they might blow me away more now than they did.
Well, yeah, because you can't believe that he was doing that at that time. That's the part that's really weird. You listen to it now and go, what the hell? People aren't even doing music this adventurous now.
That's correct.
You know what I mean? Let alone, then it had never even existed before.
Yeah.
I'll also have to interject and say that Traffic was a big influence on me, especially the period when they started being really diverse in what they were doing. Like their second record, there was a cross-fertilization between what I call psychedelia and progressive rock.
Okay.
Like Pink Floyd. I was into Pink Floyd, for instance, So, yeah. But yeah, Hendrix, those records, even the first record,
absolutely,
and Axis Bold as Love. There's some stuff on there where you're just like, "What the hell, man? This is crazy."
If six was 9,
yeah, I know, right?
Or EXP, or
from the Sun,
Yes, absolutely, and even Hendrix. I'm kind of like driving off the road a bit, but Hendrix, in the song where he's talking about coming back. And he finds the stars displaced and a world that is burned. So I'm just like, wow, what a prophet,
Yeah. Yeah. Sadly, he was right.
Yeah. We're living this now. So it's very interesting. The jumping off of that thread is like the importance of music and art in this moment in time and always, but something
especially in now eras like now,
especially now, and it seems like for artists who are deep in the zone, things come through and into the art and are set in ways that are still lasting. We can go back to so many artists and poets and stuff and read what they've said, and right in this moment in time, it seems extremely profound.
Very profound, very relevant.
And how could they even know that? They don't know that, really, right? But it comes through, right? Like a dream.
You know, it's odd. One of the most important bands for me was the Yardbirds.
Oh, okay.
Right. Yardbirds were a pivotal influence on me. And if you go back and listen to some of the subject matter and what they're actually doing, like Happenings 10 years time ago, Shapes of Things, there's all these references to environmental disasters. You know, like how we're ruining the world, how we're destroying the world, you know, how greed and capitalism, you know, all these things are in there, you know, and in amongst, you know, more mundane things, you know, because they were a rock band, you know, trying to make a living, you know. But there was some great, crazy stuff that they were dealing with. Talk about, and I sort of see them parallel to kind of to Hendrix, because they were happening at the same time.
Wow, right. And three pretty profound guitar players came out of the Yardbirds.
Oh yeah, at one point I saw the Yardbirds when Page and Beck were playing in the band together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where did you see that?
That was at the Auditorium Theater in Chicago.
Wow.
It was just before Beck bailed out. He had a meltdown and left the band.
Wow.
And then I saw them the next year as a quartet with just Jimmy Page on the Dick Clark Tour of Stars.
And how was that?
Well, it was a short set. They only played 20 minutes, but it was ridiculous. It was insane. I mean, imagine this bill: Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs, Gary Lewis and the Playboys, and the Yardbirds, who came out doing I'm a Man and then went into the sickest stuff you could imagine. I'm in St. Louis. My parents had moved to St. Louis, which was like literally 10 years behind Chicago at that time. And no one in the audience except I even got what they were doing. I was just like, yeah. And all these, like, there were all these confused teenagers like, huh?
Right. And Page, was he playing a telly at that point?
He was playing the telly, but he was already using the violin bow.
Wow.
He was already doing a lot of the weird kind of like sound stuff, you know, that he would end up doing. I mean, he was basically leaping off of what all the sound stuff that Beck had done. He was a master of sound, you know.
Absolutely.
Like Hendrix, you know.
Yeah, it's fun. It's really funny to think back to how important radio was back then. Yeah. You know, like probably I remember some of my first music I got into through the radio was on AM radio, and it would be like they'd be playing like the Beatles and Sly and the Family Stone and stuff like that, and it'd be like, what is this? What is this? You know, and eventually that went over to FM, and I remember when it flipped over, and I would be listening to some of these FM stations, which were initially free form, and they were playing album sides, and Led Zeppelin was part of that, and Pink Floyd was part of that culture, and the next thing you know, we're buying records and vinyl and getting into this whole world of stuff. And the sounds that were coming across were things that we'd never heard before. Right. You know, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I was going to say that I think the first world music influence I ever had was George Harrison.
Wow. Yeah. Right.
You know, all those like Indian, I mean, I was really fascinated. I loved that music, and
me too.
I was fascinated by it. And then I ended up seeing, you know, Monterey Pop Festival, and Ravi Shankar is playing on there. And I was just completely blown away. Yeah. I ended up seeing him at Carnegie Hall when we were in New York doing the first Shadowfax record. I saw him play there.
Wow.
Yeah. And oddly enough, Colin Walcott was at this mixing board. Colin Walcott of Oregon, advising the mixer on how it should sound, because he was studying with both Ravi and Ala Raka at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. So those influences will start way back. I mean, the seed is planted with the Beatles and Ravi Shankar, and then, you know, my first foray into world music for Shadowfax was learning to play sitar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you still play?
No. I realized early on, it took me about, I played for about 5 years, and I realized I'm going to have to devote my entire life to this instrument alone if
Yes.
I ever intend to be really good at it. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to. I was a guitar player, and I was doing all sorts of other things. I had many interests, so I gave it up.
Talking about guitar, it's like this is really fun because it's like as we find guitar players when we're growing up, who were your earliest guys? I mean, we've mentioned some of them already, but
Yeah, Bo Diddley, Muddy Waters. I started out as a big blues guy.
yeah,
Bo Diddley was the guy who got me started playing guitar. I was riding in the car with my mom, and one of his songs came on the AM radio, and I'm like, oh my God, what is that? And I said to my mother that very day, I said, will you buy me a guitar?
wow,
My mother was a piano player, a gospel musician, and she said, yeah, of course. She wanted me of you. My dad was totally against it. He was a very conservative Republican guy, and
right.
he knew I would turn into exactly what I'd become. He was afraid I was going to become a gay communist. I only became a communist. But anyway, yeah, my mom bought me that, and then Bo Diddley led me to Chuck Berry, and then a lot of R&B stuff, and like then Muddy Waters and all those guys, all the Howlin' Wolf, and luckily I ended up being alive when they were all alive, and I was able to study with and be mentored by those guys in
Wow.
Chicago.
You lived in Chicago for a time?
For most of my younger and young adult life, I lived in Chicago until 1983. I lived in Pittsburgh for a little while, and then we moved back to Chicago, and I spent most of I grew up there. That's where my musical life started and formed. And it was those guys who actually taught me how to play music and how to be a musician, and also how to be a good person, because I'd never learned that from my parents. My parents were kind of, how would I put it? Rigidly Christian and Republican.
Wow.
And it was very difficult because I was, I won't go into this too much, but it was not a pleasant place to live as a child.
Yeah, so it was like you were pulling away from that, which
I ran away, dude, because I was being violently abused.
Oh, literally ran away.
Yeah, in senior year in high school, I tried to run away from home, So my dad caught me and brought me back, and I finished, and then immediately left. As soon as I was old enough to leave, I left and went to work on the railroad in Chicago.
Wow.
I would rather work on the railroad than live in my own home.
Yeah. Well, you were forging your own path starting then,
Yep. I mean, I didn't even realize it at the time. I think about it now, and it's almost like a mythic story of working on the Rock Island Railroad, living on the south side of Chicago in a freight yard in a trailer, and learning to play blues with Willie Dixon, Hound Dog Taylor, and all these guys, It was amazing. It was an astounding time to live.
Man, I mean, you have any thoughts about writing a book?
No. Do people read books anymore?
I don't know. It's like lately I've been doing some classes at different universities, and I was in a class in Flagstaff recently with poet Ursula Rucker. And
oh yeah, Ursula, yeah.
We were talking to the students, and the teacher was like, okay, one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do this week is to go out and buy a book. Oh, wow. And everybody was groaning.
Oh yeah.
He goes, does anybody know what a book is?
Yeah. I mean, books are not, people have suggested this before because, I have a kind of interesting life. Born in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, went through horrible abuse as a child and raised in a Christian Republican household, then escaping and, going to work on the railroad. I mean, I went to work on the railroad initially when I was 16 years old,
Wow.
As a summer helper. And then as soon as I graduated high school, I went and worked on a signal gang for a year in Chicago, which was an amazing experience. I'm really glad I did it, but I quickly learned that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life, And, you know, it's not a place where you're going to expand your intellect.
Yeah. It was a way out, right?
Oh yeah, it was definitely a way out. Right.
Wow.
I
That's
didn't want to
amazing.
go to college. I couldn't see myself in college at that point
Okay.
because I wanted to play blues.
Yeah.
You know, and there was no blues being taught in college in 1966.
No.
You know, I mean, there is now probably, but not then. You know, so I wanted to go hang out with Muddy Waters and Hound Dog Taylor and all those guys, which I ended up doing.
It doesn't get better than that.
No. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the greatest lessons I've had as a person and as a musician are from those guys.
Well, tell me a couple of memories or stories from those two guys.
The best one I have is going to Willie Dixon's house and him teaching us a song. I was in a band and we met Willie. I can't remember how we met Willie. I don't remember. Oh, through Hubert Sumlin, who was Howlin' Wolf's guitar player.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I met Wolf through Hubert, because Hubert was just a totally sweet, amazing guy. Just, you know, the sweetest guy ever.
Hmm.
And we went to Willie's house and he's teaching us a song. And it was him and Lafayette Leake, who's a piano player who used to do a lot of the session work at Chess Records, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, incredible musician, Lafayette. And Willie's singing this song and Lafayette's playing on this Wurlitzer piano and I'm trying to learn it, right? Willie's sitting in this chair and here he is like 6 feet tall, just 200 pounds, you know, and it's Willie Dixon, you know, and I'm just in awe anyway. And he picks up a brown paper bag off the floor and he starts playing it as a drum set. Right. And he's singing this song. There's a rockin' wedding going on. Everybody is a rockin' strong, right? And I'm trying to learn the chords and the riffs from Lafayette. Meanwhile, my brain is totally focused on what Willie Dixon is doing.
Yeah.
Because it's the deepest music lesson I'll ever have in my life. You know?
Yes.
And I was just literally like, what? Okay, gotta focus. What? You know? Anyway, we left, and the bass player was the guy I mentioned before, Don Cody, who ended up being an incredible recording engineer. He engineered the Tony Bennett, Bill Evans record. Right?
Wow.
You know that record? An incredible record.
Incredible.
We went outside and we were standing on the sidewalk in front of Willie's house, and Don turned to me and he said, "Did you hear that, man? Did you see that?" And I said, "Mind blown, man, completely blown." And the weird thing is that the one singer and the drummer are standing there going, "What are you guys talking about?" And we're like, "Oh my God, you missed it." The greatest lesson you'll ever learn.
Magic happens.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the as far as Muddy, one of my bands did a gig with Muddy, playing in a VFW hall.
Yeah.
And it was great. I mean, Muddy was the sweetest dude. All those guys were very sweet. I mean, some of those guys had a chip on their shoulder, and I totally understood that. Black musicians raised in racist America.
Yeah.
You know, it made total sense to me when I ran into an angry black dude. I was like, "Dude, I hear you." You know?
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense to me. You know, but you know, Willie, Muddy, you know, like BB King, Hound Dog, all those guys, they were the sweetest dudes, man. They were so sweet, so generous, so kind, and so welcoming, and so, you know, helpful. I mean, Muddy, I ended up at Muddy's house, one of his apartments, and he made us his favorite snack, which was fried bologna on Ritz crackers.
Nice.
I want to tell you something, man. That is delicious. Okay, if you've never tried it, try it. Fried bologna on Ritz crackers. It's delicious.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Muddy, also famous for his open G tuning, right?
Yeah, open G or open D. Usually depend on which song he was doing.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I learned all that stuff. Yeah.
Man.
Anyway.
So, we were talking about open tunings, Muddy Waters open tunings, and how much that impacted everything.
Oh, yeah.
Guitar, it's like so many guitar players, as they were learning and listening to those records, were going like, even Keith Richards, it's kind of like, how is Keith doing that? Well,
yeah,
he had discovered that at some point, right?
Yeah. Well, were you ever into John Fahey?
I love John Fahey, yes.
Yeah, he was great at sort of like opening the door to open tunings, all these different open tunings, to guys who had never listened to blues or any of that stuff and didn't even know. I'll be honest with you, Tim, I learned to play slide guitar in regular tuning.
Sure.
Because I didn't know open tuning. I didn't know they were using open tuning.
Yeah.
Therefore, my slide playing became very precise and really controlled because I was able to kind of play in regular tuning. Whereas in open tuning, you can be much more loose with it,
Yeah.
When I discovered open tuning, I was just like, oh my God, this is a revelation. This is so much easier.
I totally agree. And there's just, you would listen to, like, I'm trying to think of like a Muddy tune, even like a Stones tune, like, because I think of some of Keith's riffs.
Yeah.
Like maybe Monkey Man or something.
Yeah,
and it's just like the sickest riff. And you wouldn't do that unless you were in that tuning.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, he was Keith, for all of his weird statements he's made over the years, was an incredible archive of American music.
Yeah.
Country, blues, rock, you name it. He knew all that stuff.
I know. I love that about him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, so, the discovery of open tunings and slide guitar and open tunings and all that is another thing that just opens music wider.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
to me, it's like
ahead.
It's an extended technique,
Yes.
It's not, it didn't take me long to get from there to like what Jeff Beck was doing on I'm a Man, just making noise, I mean, on the guitar, it seemed perfectly natural to me, So I began experimenting with that, different things on the guitar, like early on in the 70s,
So what were some of the guitars that you've known? Maybe like a little survey of some of the guitars that you've started with and ended up with up until now, perhaps.
Oh, wow. What an interesting question. Well, I started out with a K jazz box.
Wow.
Single pickup, no cutaway.
Cool.
I didn't realize what a great guitar it was at the time. It was just big and lunky, and I was like, God, I don't want this. I want a Les Paul or something, or I wanted a Les Paul, and then when I saw the Stones play in Chicago, the first 4 tours they did in Chicago, I went to see them. Because to me, the Stones were suddenly made it cool for a white kid to be into blues, right?
Yeah.
Because before that, none of my friends were into blues.
Right.
They were all listening to the Beach Boys and bands like that.
Right.
And I was like, no, I'm not interested in surf music. I don't have anything against it. It's just not my thing.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to surf in Chicago or Oklahoma. So I had the K, and then shortly after that, I got a Silvertone, which was actually a harmony, right?
Nice.
Made by Harmony.
Yeah.
And then my first decent guitar was a Gibson SG.
Oh, cool.
Which got stolen.
Mm.
And actually several of my guitars have been stolen, but that one got stolen doing a gig in Chicago. And then I bought my first Les Paul, a black Les Paul, which had been refinished and all the serial numbers were wiped out, so nobody knew what year it was, but it was obviously old. And it was a great guitar for slide, not so great for playing with your fingers, you know, but I made it work anyway because I was kind of used to that because I was a slide guy. I played slide right from the beginning. So
Okay.
And then I found a gold top Les Paul from probably around 1960. It was made.
Wow.
And it was really great. I'm like a dumbass, though. I took the pickups that were in it, which were those P90s,
Yes.
and put humbuckers in it. You know?
Yep.
I wish I'd never done that, but at the time, everybody was using humbuckers.
That was the trend.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Beck had them, Page had them, all these guys had. Everybody had humbuckers, you know. And they're great pickups, you know. They sounded great. They were louder than shit.
Yeah.
You know. And then shortly after that, I started. I mean, I'd always been playing acoustic guitars.
Yeah.
But I'd always played my girlfriend's Gibson Hummingbird.
Oh, nice guitar.
And then we split up, and I didn't have that guitar. So I went and bought the cheapest guitar I could find, which was an Ovation. Right?
Okay.
And I was also interested in playing 12-string, so I bought an Ovation 12-string too. And then when I heard Ralph Towner and saw him play, I went, "Oh man, Guild."
I know, right?
And I talked to Ralph about it. I said, "So what do you think of these? What, you know, do you like your Guild, you know, 12-string?" He said, "Yeah, it's a great guitar, you know." And I said, "What do you think of Ovations?" And Ralph says, "It's a toy. That's a toy. That's not a guitar."
Ralph knows.
Yeah, well, Ralph knew. You know, the thing about Ralph is that, have you ever met him? You ever meet Ralph?
I met him once.
Yeah.
Yes.
He has big hands.
Yeah.
You know, he has big hands and fingernails that are like normal people's toenails, you know?
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, I mean, the Guild was perfect for him. And, you know, I'm not a big guy. I'm a smaller guy. I'm much more slight than Ralph. But I mean, I bought a Guild 12-string, and when we got our first record deal, and also a Ramirez classical guitar.
Nice.
Yeah, and those were my instruments for quite a while. The Les Paul, the gold top Les Paul, the Guild 12-string, and the Ramirez classical. And then at some point, I discovered Stratocasters. You know, I'd always liked Les Pauls, but I discovered Stratocasters, and I liked the versatility of the Stratocaster. So I bought one, and it was really great, especially for doing certain kind of things, you know. And then that sort of, you know, I used to go back and forth between the Strat and the gold top Les Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we were touring with Shadowfax, I ended up I needed an electric 12-string, and at the time there weren't many options.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I ended up getting an Ovation electric.
Okay.
Which were actually played well and actually sounded really good.
What was the body like on those?
It had a double cutaway.
Okay.
Almost like you know, kind of like average double cutaway.
Okay.
But they played really easily. It weren't hard to play. They stayed in tune, which was a plus, you know. But then shortly after that, you know, Shadowfax sort of started to blow up. And I started getting all these endorsements. I got a Fender endorsement, I got a Gibson endorsement, and I had a Guild endorsement. This was the 80s, where endorsements were being given out like crazy.
That's like heaven.
I know, it was crazy, dude. I mean, Guild. I mean, I got an electric 12-string from Guild, which was one of those with the piezo in it, like
Yep.
It was an electric body, but it looked like an acoustic, but it had a piezo. And I added a regular pickup because I didn't love the way the piezo sounded.
Right.
It was too brittle for me. You know?
Yeah.
And I used that for a long, long time. And I love that neck. The neck of the Guild is just, it's beautiful. You know, Guilds are great guitars.
Oh yeah.
So that was basically what I was using through the Shadowfax years was. And then I kind of stopped playing the Les Paul, mostly because I got tired of having all that weight on my shoulder.
They're heavy, right?
They are heavy. They are way too heavy. Yeah.
Yeah. And what got you involved with the Stratocaster, do you think?
It was Ry Cooder.
Okay, I get that.
I started listening. I had been listening to Ry all along. You know, I've always had this love of roots music and country music and blues music. So when I hear Ry and I'm going, oh, that's not a Les Paul.
Yeah.
You know, and I love this sound. He would get like an electric slide sound, was amazing.
Yeah. I was just going to say he's another a great slide player, right?
Oh, one of the most underrated slide guitar players of all time, in my opinion.
Very underrated.
Absolutely great slide guitar player.
And what about amplifiers and like effects throughout the Shadowfax period?
Well, the early period of Shadowfax, I didn't use any effects except for a univibe and a fuzz pedal, a distortion pedal, right?
Classic.
Yeah. And then, you know, like I had pedals, but I didn't really use them in a live setting because I didn't, you know, it was like not the era of pedals. Pedals were pretty wonky in those days.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I didn't use many pedals. I just turned my amp up.
Well, that's how it was done, right?
Yes, it was. And much to the detriment of our hearing.
Yes.
I mean, we used to play clubs, dude, and I was playing through an orange amplifier.
Oh, wow.
Right? 100-watt orange amplifier.
And that was cranked?
Oh, yeah. To get distortion, you know? And, you know, the bass player was playing through like a Sun, you know?
Right.
And then our horn player, who was playing Lyricon at the time, was playing through an acoustic amp. You remember those?
Yes.
Oh, my God. Well, I mean, I don't know how people survived our gigs. They had to have been painful.
I even heard stories of like Dave Liebman's first gig with Miles, and he goes, all I remember is going on stage, and it was all Marshall stacks, and there was some groove going on. It was really loud, and we were just playing, and all of a sudden the gig was over when Miles walked off the stage.
Well, Dave held his own in that band. I will say that.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know how they hurt each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, in that era of Hendrix, and you know, just I guess I was growing up at the edge of that, and everybody was still like the first time I saw Robin Trower, and you know, it was like
2 stacked Marshalls.
Yeah, a couple stacks, and he had some kind of flanger phaser that was on, and as soon as the lights went down and they turned his rig on, you could just hear.
I had one of those. I had
really loud and noisy.
Neutron phaser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, and that was a big deal effect in the mid 70s. It was on every
absolutely.
record.
I used that all over the first Shadowfax record, the Neutron phaser. Yeah.
Yeah, just an amazing sound, and it's still and also, you know, the other effect, the Hendrix effect, the univibe. Still, you know, to this day, it's like one of the classic sounds.
That's a great sound. It's a beautiful sound. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never owned one. I would always buy one because they were very expensive back in the day.
Yeah.
For a pedal, the Univibe was super expensive.
And then I remember at some point, you know, tape echoes started showing up, like the Echoplex and the Rolands and stuff like that. And, but, you know, it's fascinating to look back at that, and it kind of reviewing gear and how amps were used and everything was turned up, and you know, it changed everything. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it was just how things were at the time. I think back about it now and think, God, it was so loud.
Yeah. And that's all there was. It wasn't like there was a lot of other options at the time.
Well, no, there was that's what everyone was doing, you know. I mean, PAs weren't as evolved as they were now. I mean, by the time Shadowfax went on the road in the 80s, you know, we developed to the point where like stage volume was almost detrimental. If you had a loud stage amp, it was not helpful to the overall mix, you know, and we slowly but surely learned that. But in the old days, your stage volume was the volume people heard.
That's right.
And then only the vocals were coming through the PA, nothing else was.
One of the last times I saw Jeff Beck was here in Camden, New Jersey, and he was playing with Vinny. And, he had his Marshalls. They were pointed out to the audience, and we were way back, and we could hear his amps.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, you don't normally do that, but the original guys, you're going to hear their amps still.
Well, Beck was all about sound.
Oh, yeah.
And he was one of the most sophisticated, refined guitar players in terms of, crafting a sound. I mean, it became an art form with Beck. The way he used his hands on the instrument. And he was doing that back in the Yardbirds.
Yeah.
You can hear it on the recordings where you're like, I remember the first time I heard him doing like a wah effect, and wahs didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
And he was doing it with the palm of his hand in the volume pedal.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, what the hell, dude?
Yeah. Just how many people did he inspire? Like so many. And he never stopped evolving,
No, absolutely not. You hear some of the later stuff he did. It's brilliant playing. Yeah. I mean, I don't love all the music, but the playing itself is astounding.
Just incredible. Yeah. But we're lucky. I think back, over time and my record collection and stuff like that. And it's like, we're lucky we grew up in the time we grew up in.
Absolutely.
And you were absolutely blessed to be in Chicago at that time with those musicians.
I think about that all the time, about how, like as a young white kid, like 19 years old, I'm being ushered into this community of Black American musical masters.
Absolutely.
And they're, giving me that music to me.
Yeah.
Allowing me in, welcoming me in, and then getting to do gigs with them and play out and stuff was amazing. I mean, it was an incredible time. I mean, of course, like, every time there was lots of difficulties going on during that period. I mean, it was very tough to be a Black guy in Chicago in the
absolutely
70s. I mean, I saw so much racism from the cops, for instance, just an attitude just because I was hanging out with Black guys.
Absolutely. Well, there's kind of a famous film, right? It might be called Blues, or it might be called Chicago Blues. It's a documentary that was done by an English filmmaker, I think. I have it here somewhere.
Oh, really?
And Buddy Guy is in it. I tend to feel that it was in black and white, but
interesting.
And it was probably in the late 60s, I think. I don't think it was 70s. And it's a beautiful document to see Chicago then, and you can feel it. You can feel the vibe there.
It was a rough place.
Yeah.
And especially the South Side. The South Side, this is before a lot of the urban development and a lot of the social programs that would come later after the civil rights movement.
Yes.
But the South Side, parts of the South Side of Chicago actually looked like bombed out Berlin.
Yeah.
It was so, poor and so tough,
Mm-hmm.
And, the weird thing is that it just was how it was for us. If you're down there, you're living there, you're just like, well, this is how it is. A lot of America was really poor then. I mean, I would go visit my grandparents in Oklahoma, and they were poor.
Yeah.
They were poor people, They weren't starving, but they were poor,
Yeah.
So, but it was an incredible environment in spite of all those difficulties.
Absolutely.
And I mean, creatively, I sometimes think that creativity flourishes under adverse conditions.
Yes. And I think, when I think about music and art, creativity, I really think that it's a gateway of escape for people. It's a meditation. It can be something that just takes us away, shuts off our mind. And if we really can get in the zone, something's going to come out at the end, and we travel, we travel. And I, when you look back, you can see how that was a way out for so many people. It was playing music or singing or painting or whatever it might have been, dancing, making film, whatever it might be, a way of, and I talked to someone recently, and we were just talking about the importance of art and music. And she said, she was from Argentina, and she said, I grew up there and there was no money anywhere. And the most beautiful art was everywhere, pasted against walls. And she goes, no matter what happens, art will always thrive, in the most, worst situations.
Yeah. In the most,
which is what you're describing.
Places. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, that kind of brings us to today. And, this is like a really big topic. There's a bunch of topics about the value of art and music and everything that goes along with that in today's society. And we are faced with things that we've never had to think about, one being AI, and everything that's in the news today on a daily basis. It is just like, it's so much that we can't even take it all in. And once again, for me anyway, I'm leaning so hard into painting and so hard into music and wanting to play and express all of this stuff. What's your take on, now and being an artist?
It's really, really difficult and I'm glad that I grew up in the time that I did.
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself incredibly fortunate because, and the weird thing about it is that for younger people who are now sort of coming into this world of creativity, this is what they know. So they deal with it in whatever way they can. And I know a lot of younger musicians and artists that, I'm friends with. They create, they don't care. It doesn't matter. The time may be like a pressure cooker, which makes it seem more important than ever to be creative, because it's one of the few ways you can positively, do positive things in the world that have no negative consequences.
Yes.
Zero. You know what I mean? So in fact, just the opposite, they're actually helping people. And it's like you were talking about, hearing music and having it save you,
mm-hmm.
or seeing an art piece and having an understanding, oh my God, there's a world that I don't understand that I want to know about. First time I ever saw a Vincent van Gogh self-portrait was in the Art Institute in Chicago when I was like 13 years old.
Wow.
And I stood in front of it staring at it for like 20 minutes because finally my dad came up and said, what are you doing? I said, I can't believe this piece, and he told me all about his life and death,
Wow.
And which made it even more intriguing,
yes.
that he was this disturbed person,
yeah,
who was never recognized in his own lifetime, but yet he changed art forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to me, I just looked at the piece and I thought, I have never seen anything more authentic in my life. It seems so much him that was coming through the canvas. Wow. And I think about it now, it gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
Because, that was his life being put onto a canvas with paint,
Yeah.
And there he is, you can look at him and you can see him, and it's vital and alive and amazing and beautiful and kind of like, it makes you think about, well, what's, we can do stuff, you know what I mean? You can create. Creation is amazing. It's what this life is actually supposed to be about.
Yeah. It's not about destroying.
Or making money or collecting things or materialism. It's about creation, this is one of the reasons I became a Buddhist, is because it resonated, that concept of the act of creation, meaning being here and being present. Because that's what happened when
being present. Van
Gogh painted that painting. He was all in, and you can see it.
Yeah.
He was totally present when he was doing that. And that's what happens in the greatest musical settings, greatest paintings. The person is all in, 100%.
All in.
There doing it, That's
Yeah.
what struck me about seeing Weather Report the first time I saw them live. Because more than any of the bands of that era, what they were doing, I didn't understand.
Yes.
Because it was so tumultuous and like seemingly just happening in the moment.
Yeah.
Where I was like, how are they doing this?
When was the last time you heard their first album?
I've listened to Electric Lady. I'm not Electric. I Sing the Body Electric recently.
Okay.
But the first album, I've listened to that. I go back to it all the time.
I listened a few weeks ago with some friends of mine. One gentleman is a saxophonist and another one is a vibraphone player and an incredible drummer. And neither of them were familiar with that first record.
You're kidding.
And we sat there. They knew all the other Weather Report, but they didn't know the first one.
They knew I Sing the Body Electric?
They knew the later on stuff.
Yeah.
But and maybe not even the live album.
Yeah.
That was part of I Sing the Body Electric too, I think.
Yeah, the Live in Tokyo.
Yeah. So they were so blown away, and it was so much fun to share that.
Yeah.
Because it is a completely organic thing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's so killing.
Yeah.
And it's so, that's the thing. It's like, some bands come up and they're so inspired by other people, and you can hear the other people in their music. And with Weather Report, it was like, wow, they had Wayne. They had Zawano and Miroslav, and it was like a whole different terrain that we had never heard before, but we liked it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the interesting thing was that I heard Mahavishnu before I heard Weather Report, because a friend of mine promoted one of their first concerts in Chicago. And he said, "Oh, do you want to hear this? You want to go to this concert?" And it was the weirdest bill. It was Livingston Taylor, C-Train, and Mahavishnu Orchestra, right?
As they did in those days.
Again in the 70s in Chicago or everywhere. And I said, yeah, I'll go see that. And I was hanging out backstage.
Wow.
I heard about what Mahavishnu, but I didn't. And I watched him. I was just like, holy shit, what is this? But the weird thing about Mahavishnu was that I got it right away because it was guitar driven.
Yeah.
And there were structures that I understood.
Yes.
Or, it was like these kind of these constructs I got, musical constructs. But with Weather Report, when I heard them and when I saw them live, they would do these improvs, right? They would start a song, they would do like the head, and then they'd go into these crazy improvs.
Yes.
Where you'd just be like, what the hell? How do they know what they're doing here?
I know.
And then it'd be like just building this momentum, and then it would stop on a dime.
Yes.
And at the time, I didn't understand how they were doing that.
Yeah.
Now I know, listening to it now, I see how they were doing it. There were musical cues that Zawano was playing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It makes perfect sense. But at the time, I was just like, this is a fucking mystery, man.
Yeah.
This is so mysterious. I just didn't know how they were doing it. And it was so intriguing. That was why I really wanted to start improvising.
Absolutely. And Weather Report was one of those, as you said, the word authentic, that they were all about that. Miles was all about that. Mahavishnu was all about that.
Yeah.
Jan Hammer, where'd he come from? It's just like Billy Cobham. I mean, it's, we've been touched by some of the heaviest bands ever.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And where are we now? The onslaught of AI and, people worrying about art being made with AI or films being made with AI or music.
Very disturbing period to live through, I have to say.
It is. And it's like, but that's not what the point of creativity is. It's not to use AI to be creative. It should be pick up your axe. And find some stuff. But this is where we're at. And, I was mentioning universities recently, and, there's a huge trend in university students using AI.
Yeah.
to answer the questions. A friend told me the other day in an ear training class that the people used AI to figure out the intervals, and they got straight A's, but then they really couldn't hear
You
the
can't hear the
interval.
music.
Yeah, they couldn't hear the minor third or the sixth interval.
That's the difference between. I mean, that's why. I mean, I play by ear. I always have. I never
Sure.
really learned. I mean, I learned how to read a little bit in the
Sure.
later Shadowfax era, but I learned by ear, and
Yeah.
you have to do the work when you learn by ear. And I'll tell you, there's nothing better for your ear training than trying to learn the head of a Charlie Parker song from an LP.
Yeah.
On
Right.
guitar.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what's that? What's that note? What's that note? You know what I mean?
That's
ear
hard.
training. You're learning how to listen.
And also,
hear music.
I think when you're learning like that, it starts putting the melody inside your head, and once it's in there, you can get it.
Yeah, and then it's part of the archive of stuff you can always tap when you want it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, moving on from that idea, we're still in the now. Abstract Kompanion. Do you want to talk about that project?
Sure. Yeah, it's basically, it's funny you mentioned AI, and I have never been a person who's against the use of technology.
Sure.
In art, in making art, and creativity, and especially in music. I mean, when synths came in, a lot of people said, "Oh, this is not cool at all," And I was like, "No, it's very cool. Are you kidding me? Those are sounds you will never create with a normal instrument." You know what I mean?
Same with drum machines.
Yeah, drum machines. I was all in immediately. And like sampling technology and DJ technology, I was like, yeah, why not, man? And the thing about it is that stuff like that is a ground up kind of development. It starts at kind of base level of musicians creating things or creators creating things. AI is a top down kind of thing where it's people who are only interested in money have created something to make money.
That's correct.
That's what AI is about.
Yes.
Right. And the weird thing is that up to this point, AI hasn't made any money. It's not lucrative yet.
Yeah.
None of these AI companies are making any money.
Mm-hmm.
But what they are doing is kind of taking away the initial aspects of learning how to create away from people. That's what you're doing.
We're learning
their ability to create.
Yeah, or learning how to think on your own. Or
and I think that like using computers, for certain things is great. I mean, I use them to do what I call a word scrambling for like lyrics.
I love that.
And it's basically an idea stolen from the analog world, which is William Burroughs.
Absolutely.
We used the cut up method, right?
Yeah.
And Bowie used that. Other people have used similar methods.
I love that.
I do that on the computer. You know what I mean? Where I put words in, spin them out, spin them around, see how they come out, and then start putting it together into semi, abstract but semi-coherent, things.
Yes.
And that's basically what I'm doing with Abstract Kompanion. Abstract Kompanion is like, the other thing is that when drum machines came out, I bought one immediately. I didn't have any place to use it, but I was using it, experimenting with it, trying to do things with it. Same thing with synths. Bought a synth immediately, trying to learn how to use it and how would I use it. But I never use, in Shadowfax, we use synths a lot. Yeah. But I'm all about, I have always been about trying new things to get sound. Because to me, it's just about new sounds I haven't heard before, sounds that haven't existed before. There are things you can do in computers and synths and all these technologies that don't exist in the natural world.
That's right.
But they're great. They're amazing sounds. They're useful, So basically, I went into this world of beat-driven electronic music like many, many years ago.
Yes.
I never really had a way to release music like that because I was doing all these other things like Shadowfax, and improvising guitar. But in my studio, I'm in there like cranking out all the other projects, under different names. Abstract Kompanion is kind of the culmination of years of that kind of experimentation, where I use samples, guitar, like play guitar, do spoken word things, do beats, like program beats, and put it all together in a semi-coherent package, So it's kind of like, I don't even know what to call it. People ask me, well, what is it? And I don't know. It's music.
Yeah. Well, it's like I feel like the covers. Do you make the covers?
I do. I do all the artwork too. Yeah.
I love the artwork.
Thank you.
And that's done in a computer, I'm assuming.
I started out doing what I call sort of collage work.
Yeah.
In using actual collage materials.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the early 90s, when I was doing these flyers for gigs we were doing in LA here, and I have a lot of friends who are architects, artists, designers, etc. So I started putting these little, like collages together for my flyers, and I would hand them out to people, and all my artist friends would go, "You have an incredible sense of composition and a beautiful eye." This one artist I know, Robin Mitchell, is a brilliant painter. She saw my stuff and said, "You're an incredible collagist." And I said, "Well, thank you."
That's
I work at it. I try to make it work. To me, it's like visual music.
Absolutely.
You compose things in a certain way. So, yeah, it's a great way to explore another aspect of creativity that isn't sound,
Yeah.
And so, like in the digital world, that becomes even easier, although more challenging in a certain way.
Yeah.
Because, actual physical processing is kind of, once you get used to it, it's really easy.
Yeah.
Once you get a flow. And I pretty much have gotten a pretty good workflow in terms of my digital collage making. So, yeah.
Do you work with any particular photo programs or art programs?
Yes, I use. Basically, I will take a photograph. Start with a photograph, and it's really a matter of finding the right subject matter that will. Because I use this one specific program called Decimate. Right, which basically gives you a whole palette of different effects, and you just run them through it until it comes out with something that you like.
Exactly.
And then there's another one I have that's called Union, that is actually a collage making, where you can overlay one image on top of the other.
I love that.
Once it's in there, then you can alter it with like contrast and things like that,
Yeah, but what I was going to say, I think that's awesome. And what I was going to say, looking at your covers, I think the covers are the window to your music. They give the listener an idea through visuals of like what the vibe of this is. And I think they really work well together. I think.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's basically what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give you a window into the music.
And, it's like, music is weird sometimes, especially with instrumental music. It can be a sense of a place. And when we go back to your album Bone Structure, which I just recently, we talked about this, I don't know, like last year, I had discovered that album somehow. I saw it in New York, I think, and I bought it because Gregg was on it and I knew you. And I was like, oh, this looks fun. And I remember one night I was driving through Philly in an industrial neighborhood with it on cranked. And I'm like, oh, this is the perfect soundtrack for what's going on right now. And I fell in love with that record. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is that there was music made back in the day, whether we're talking the 80s, and we can go back to some of the synthesizer and drum machine sounds back then, or we can go the 90s, like Bone Structure, and the sounds of that time, what that evokes. those are still very powerful times, you know, and very powerful sounds. It's not like it's gone away.
Yeah.
That stuff is still valid. And you know, where you're at now is like sci-fi, you know, it's like something's going on, you know, and you know, it's like, yeah, I'm like this too. I just feel like a lot of the music is like atmospheric, and it's some kind of a place. I just did a record with Elliot Sharp, and we're trying to come up with titles right now. And you know, sometimes you have to get away from the music for quite a while and forget about it, and then come back, and then you hear it and go, "What the hell? What is this?" and then it's like you can find titles, but we both agreed it's something about a place and a space, and sometimes it's about a time period. But usually it's also could be about a dream, you know. So it's very interesting. I think we have a kind of an affinity as fellow guitar players and stuff like that.
And you're a visual artist too. I mean, you're a painter, so
yeah.
Titles are also very important to me. I mean, you don't want to be too obvious, but you do want to evoke some kind of vibe that, you know, implies what the music might be about, you know.
Absolutely.
But I also always want to be sort of abstruse enough to where somebody can just sort of can interpret it in their way, in whatever way they hear it, in the way they read it and what they see.
Yes.
You know, so a bit, you know, like, you know, abstraction is helpful. Figurative abstraction is really like very useful, especially when you're talking about visual elements or like using words in a certain way. And I've always been interested in words anyway. I studied creative writing in college.
All right.
I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a poet, you know.
You are.
Well, and actually I have never stopped writing poetry. I mean, you know, recently I just came across some lyrics, some poetry that I wrote after going to Europe for the first time with Shadowfax.
Wow.
Right. And I came across these lyrics, and they had been stored away in a pamphlet, in a little thing I had. And it was, the minute I read it, I was like, oh God, I remember this so well. And it was 3 verses, right? The first verse is based on an incident that happened, me seeing something in Madrid, Spain.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The second verse is based on being in Berlin when the wall was still up, right? And being in that weird environment, going through East Germany and stuff. The third verse was coming back to LA after being in Europe, which was a real weird kind of like warp, you know, like geological, you know, like time warp or whatever. You know?
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Basically, I was just trying to capture these weird moments, and they're literally descriptive, but they sound utterly surreal.
Yeah.
Because what I was witnessing was surreal.
Yeah.
You know, here I was in the first verse was, there was a guy begging on a sidewalk in the middle of Madrid. This is the summertime. It's probably about 98 degrees out. He's on his knees on the hard concrete, right? With his beggar's bowl in front, with his hands up like this, right?
Wow.
In penance, right? I stood there watching him for a while. He never moved. He never moved. It was stunning, and I was like in awe and also horrified at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Because that aspect of Christianity I don't resonate to. You know
yes.
what I mean? And then going to Berlin and seeing the wall up,
mm-hmm.
and you know, when I went to Berlin, when we went into East Germany, I went in with all this stuff in my head that everything I've heard about that world is propaganda, American propaganda. Until I got there and I realized, oh no, this is just as bad as anyone. It's way worse than I imagined. I was horrified by it.
Yeah.
And the fact that I was standing in front of this wall where numerous people had been shot to death by the East German border guards.
Yeah.
You know, there were crosses there. You know, it was mind blowing. And then I came back to LA, and here we are in, you know, the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
This freewheeling capitalist nightmare. And the first thing that struck my mind was how there were people living under the freeway.
Yeah.
Whole families living under the freeway, you know, and I was just, so that was the song. I just actually used those lyrics on one of the Abstract Kompanion songs.
Wow.
It's called Tooth and Eye.
Which record is that? The new record?
It's the most recent one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll check that out. Yeah, heavy and poetry and music and painting and all those things help us deal with these things that our mind can't really wrap itself around. So we express it with paint, or digital art, or music, or poetry, and maybe it helps us somehow.
It helps me. I mean, I don't know. You know, I've processed every adverse situation I've been through with music.
Yeah, me too. I think that's really true.
It's been my therapy, and I've done therapy, and therapy's great, you know, but you know, like music is the medicine to me.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, where I'm down to right now is music is the medicine, and nature is the church. You know, maybe church is not it, and nature is the sacred place. You know? And to go out and look at water birds, and you know, go to bird blinds and hang out and just watch nature. You know, it's just like mind bending, and it totally clears your head every time. It makes you go, wow.
There was a period when I was living in Chicago when I became an avid bird watcher.
Yeah.
And I joined the Audubon Society, and I would do the yearly birdathon where you'd see as many species as you could. And one day you'd get someone to sponsor you, you know, like for a certain amount of money for every species. And one day I duped my father into donating $100 for every species I could see in one day. And I'm sure he thought it would be like $15 or whatever.
Yeah.
I saw about 50 species that day. And he was like, "Oh my God." I said, "You promised."
Nice one.
Yeah.
Dude, this has been an amazing hang.
Yeah, definitely. Great to see you again and talk with you again.
Yeah, and hopefully I'll get out your way sometime this year. We'll see. Maybe we can do a hang, but
you can go to Rugenwagner again.
Yeah. Before we close out, I just had one more question, and that is, looking back over your whole span of your creative life to now, and taking in mind everything that's going on now and where things might be heading, what is your advice to creatives in general?
I think, you know, don't stop. Never stop. You know, just keep on going no matter what. Mm-hmm. You know, and use whatever tool you can as long as it helps your creativity. Mm-hmm. But don't use it as a crutch. You know? Right. Don't use it as a crutch. Don't get lazy. You know, I mean, you know, I was talking about using technology to do my lyrics, you know. It still takes me days to do one song. Sure. You know, whereas you could ask AI to do it and it would do it in, you know, 3 minutes or whatever, you know. No, I want my stuff to, my music, my words to be me, from me, my voice, you know. And there's only one way you can do that. You have to create it yourself. So no matter what, keep going. Don't stop. Never give up. And even if you can't make a living at it, keep on going anyway. Create anyway. Create on the side. You know, do whatever you need to. You know, like I've been fortunate because I grew up in a time when you could make money and get royalties. And it's much harder now but it's not stopping anyone. I see more and more young musicians creating than ever. And now they're not burdened with this huge like musical industry infrastructure. They just circumvent all that and they just put it out.
Yeah.
And that's what I say. Just go for it. Just put it out there.
Do it.
Do it. Just do it. And don't stop. Never stop. There's a tagging crew here in LA, graffiti crew called CBS, and CBS stands for Can't Be Stopped.
I love it.
And that's it. And they're doing their art in the streets. Can't be stopped, you know. And that's how it should be. Don't be stopped. Keep on going. Yeah.
That's a great mantra.
Yep.
The other thing, getting back to where you said it takes you days to get your lyrics together, just made me think about how it's not always pleasant to create. It's not an easy thing.
No, it's hard.
You know, I find it to be a struggle when I'm really head down and composing and working on something. It's just time. It's lots of time. It's like it'll be 4 o'clock and the next thing you know, it's 9 o'clock. And you're like, oh, I think something happened. You know, and the next day you started.
More than once, I've been like, looking at the clock and I'm going, fuck, it's 1 a.m. and I'm still working on these lyrics. You know, I'm like, okay, I got to take a shower. And, you know, and I've done it. I've gotten the song done and everything. And I don't, you know, I go to bed and I have no idea how that sounds.
Yeah.
It might be complete crap, but
yeah.
You know, and then I wake up the next morning and listen to it and go, nope, that was not a waste of time, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, as you get older, you're able to refine your process and you can get more selective about what you do and you don't waste as much time, but it's still a grind. You still have to grind it out. It's muscle work.
I think that's right.
You know, it's like digging a ditch. I mean, people don't want to hear that, but it is. You're trying to get something done. It requires work. If it's going to be worth anything, it's going to require work
and intention, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's like same with painting. You know, sometimes you can throw paint down and be working with paint, and you know, something might emerge right away. Sometimes nothing emerges, and you just keep toiling away until all of a sudden there's a spark or something.
Right.
Boom! There it is. It emerges, and but then you still come back to it here and there. You know.
Right. I mean, there have been more than one time, you know, more than once, you know, creating a number of different things where I'll be like, oh, I can't do this anymore. And I don't think it's working at all. You know, and I walk away from it, you know, go to bed, wake up the next morning and look at it, listen to it, read it or whatever and go, oh, I was wrong. This is great. This is totally good. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I was just tired, you know, because it's tiring.
It is.
You know, it takes energy and intellectual, you know, and heart, soul, spirit to actually create something unique and good, you know.
That's where the authentic comes from.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's from that hard work. It's not from just getting it quickly. It's you have to dive in deep, you know. And I always loved David Byrne or it wasn't David Byrne. It was the filmmaker David, who just passed. I can't say his last name.
I don't know.
Yeah, you know all his films, but he said, you know, creativity isn't about just swimming on top of the water. It's about diving down deep, and the deeper you go, you start seeing all this magnificent stuff, and you keep going, you know, and that's, you know, you got to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can stay on the surface. You'll end up doing a bunch of vapid pop music, you know. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, if that's what you want to do, that's fine, you know. But if you want to create something unique and authentic, you have to work. You have to dig deep.
Yes. Well, that's a great place to end up on. I feel like this is part one because this could go on for a while.
I don't know how much anyone would want to hear me blather on about this stuff, but
man, it's just like life experience, and you know, these kinds of discussions can only happen when you've been through so much, and the things that you've seen, the stories that you have to tell that you haven't even told today, they're all in there, and it's all coming out in different ways, and it's important to continue. And I really thank you for your time today, and it's a great hang, man.
Back at you, brother. Thank you for inviting me to participate. I'm very happy about it. Yeah.
Indeed, me too. And
all right, thanks.
I guess I will sign off to you, GE. Thank you so much, GE Stinson, joining us here at Searching for Sparks. We'll catch you next time. Take care. Bye.